it's really important to me, to be able to move through this profession as somebody who wants to give back and who actually really cares about management and cares about that relationship to my team.
Welcome to Real Creative Leadership, a place where creative leaders can find insights and practical guidance on the day-to-day job of being a creative leader. We focus on real issues, topics, and insights of creativity in the business world. Join me as we explore the best strategies for developing your team, getting others to embrace your vision, and generating amazing experiences. This webinar series is produced by the Stoke Group. I'm your host, Adam Morgan, Adobe Executive Creative Director and author of Sorry Spock, Emotions Drive Business. And this is Real Creative Leadership. Today, I am super excited to talk to Lucia Matioli. She is going to give us her perspective on an interesting topic, which is how do you make that jump from a senior creative to a creative director? And a lot of us have either gone through it or we're hoping to go through it. And there are so many questions about making that jump because the difference between just, working on the craft and managing teams and managing a whole process and having the vision and understanding leadership and marketing strategy and business strategy is just such a big, big change. So we're going to dig deep into that topic with Lucia today. We're so excited to hear from her experiences. But let me first start out by introducing Lucia. Lucia comes from us. She is the Senior Creative Director and Global Creative at Udemy. And she runs a large team, the global team of building and creating learning content on their learning platform. But before that, she has an interesting career path. She started out as an art director at The Gap and Old Navy, where she was responsible for brand development and in-store marketing. And after that, she launched her own design firm, Good Thinking Co., where she worked with startups like Netflix and Levi Strauss. And later on moved to New York, where she worked with clients like Echo Unlimited. After that, she moved over to Mark Echo Enterprises and worked as an in-house role as vice president and creative director. And from there, she moved on to working with a variety of clients such as AT&T, Xerox, Thomson Reuters, and Delta Airlines. And now she comes to us as the senior creative director of Udemy. I'm so excited to have her here because she's got such a good background in building and managing teams. And we're going to talk about this topic of making the jump to creative director and learning from her experience of how she's helped teams and helped individuals make that leap, and also her own personal journey of becoming a creative director. Welcome to Real Creative Leadership.
Thanks, Adam. I'm so happy to be here.
This is great. We also share some Italian heritage. She's Italian and I'm just a wannabe Italian. So that's a great connection right off the start.
Yeah, but as Italians go, we're happy to accept anybody who wants to be Italian. So no big deal.
That's fair enough. It's not like some other countries that want to turn away. That's great.
Exactly.
All right. So today's dialogue of how to make that next step to a creative director. First, I want to start out before we get into how we help others. It would be great to hear about your journey. Talk to us about, as you made that step from being a creative, senior creative and moving up to creative director, what were some of the lessons learned or milestones for you?
Oh boy, probably not enough time to go through everything, right? Like it's such an interesting path actually, and one that changes a lot. So yeah, when I started out, it's always interesting to me, like, when you go from like an education and you're just kind of like launched into this whole array of new processes, new people, new discovery, et cetera, that you just can't even begin to perceive when you're in school. And so, yeah, I started off, I think, the most significant steps for me were ones at the Gap, right? Where, I was a second creative hire at Old Navy. It was the inception of that brand, which was amazing. We had amazing leadership there. And, as it goes, I think there's a balance, when we're talking about moving up the ranks. One is that, I've always been very passionate. I'm one of those types of people who I don't consider myself ever one of those, somebody who like sits on the sidelines. Like, I really like to get in and challenge, and not just to hear my own voice either, but like to do the right thing when it comes to the work and the story building and the strategy around like the creative. And, I think probably that has more to do with my trajectory than, even the work itself. So, starting off at, Old Navy, like I always just found myself, in these positions of being able to take on more responsibility, and then start managing people and, kind of going from there. And, even I'll say that. So like, getting that experience of working internally, working at an agency, working at a design firm, but like specifically internally, I think, the trajectory has like kind of like exploded off the planet. The other thing is running my own business in conjunction with these things, right? So having to pull people together to manage a project load, having to scale, and I run like a really small agency, basically, sole proprietorship. So, I would scale and then restrict, if you will, or like, cut back the people as needed per project. But, that enabled me to be very agile. And then it also gave me the insight to just kind of wearing a bunch of different hats, so that I got to see kind of like the ecosystem of like, what a PM's role was, what account manager role was, what a marketing myself, sort of strategy, and having to do all that on top of the creative, on top of managing people. I think that really gave me a foothold into just kind of that leadership. It's like it's different in a way when you have, again, referring back to that passion, when it's your business, it's your work, you're putting yourself forward. I think the table stakes shift a little bit, where it's like you're kind of, my perception was always like, I'm only as good as my last project kind of thing, and I think it helped just facilitate that continued moving forward. And so, I mean, my background is really varied. I've done a bunch of different things. I've done things for myself. I've done things for other people. I've done things for design agencies, ad agencies, internal agencies. So I think all of these things kind of like gave me sort of like the next piece, the next piece, the next piece, the next piece. However, I will say, as I mentioned, it's also just part of my character. Like I enjoy working with people, and management is challenging, but like I enjoy problem solving, sort of, always from a creative perspective, that bigger picture. What is the strategy? What is the purpose? What are we doing? And why are we doing it? But also from, a team building perspective, having to come in and create a culture and cultivate trust and, all of this. So, they've really been, and I've heard this too, like I'll say this because I think this is actually important, like as a woman in leadership, especially creative leadership, you have to, in my opinion, you have to carve out that voice for yourself and like continue to push forward. And I think for me, there was always that, I applied for jobs that felt out of my range, and I just kept putting myself forward and having sort of like that faith and trust and belief that I would be able to figure it out as I went along. But like, honestly, you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Like that's how I felt like a lot of my career. It was like flying by the seat of my pants. And like, I think that's why I was a consultant for a really long time, because there was comfort in the chaos somehow. And like, also like to have all the pieces kind of come together. It's like, oh my God, this is really happening. Right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've like fully answered your question. It's kind of like roundabout, but yeah, that's been my experience.
Oh, you did great. In fact, there are so many good nuggets that I want to go back and address, one at a time on each of them. So the first one that is really critical, and just to set the ground rules a little bit for those listening, so many times, and this was the myth that I believed early on in my career as a creative career, it was that the way to get to leadership is through the craft. I thought that if I just got better and better as a writer or designer, then one day the world will see my glory and make me a creative director. And I think to dispel that myth and really talk about the things that you did that got you to where you are. One of the first ones you mentioned was strategy. And there was a saying of like, some of the best doers are strategic thinkers.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about, because I think opening your mind up to strategy and not just thinking the craft.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about how that helps you become a greater creative leader and creative director and all of those things.
Yeah, I think that's really, that's really key, and I'm glad that you sort of sifted through and pulled that up again. That to me, when you're thinking about, or when I'm thinking about, a brand, bringing a brand to life, connecting with the consumer, I'm really thinking about experience, right? And there are all these little things that lead up to that, but they're almost like tactics, and this is something actually I have a lot of conversations about, like, especially with designers, is like, no, you're jumping from point A to point Z, and there's like, the rest in the middle, which is part of that process, right? So continuing to ask, like, why, like, what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And if you can't answer solidly from, I think this is kind of like in my career now, like, where I'm at, like that business perspective, as well as the creative perspective, they have to like live in unison, right? And harmony. So, I think, really kind of like asking those questions and digging deeper, is really where I think the creative hangs its hat on. Without strategy, like, I can't do anything that's substantial. I'm not moving the needle. I'm not adding to, the organization as a whole. I like that kind of problem solving thinking of like, look, this has what we're doing from a creative output. Eventually, when we get there, we'll have the ability to move the needle in terms of the conversation we're having with our users or our customers or our audience or what have you. And, that to me is really important. And it's also really important to understand, I really believe that, design and creativity serves, right? Like, we serve people, we serve our organization, we serve our clients, we serve our consumers, et cetera. So really understanding fundamentally what people are lacking, what they're missing, what the connection that we can have and we can bring to that conversation is like the sweet spot, I think, that leads to great creative work. And it's true, there's a lot of people, especially like designers, let me quantify that, designers who enter, and myself included, like, I never thought I would be thinking about the business, right? Like, I always thought, like, and this is like early days, like, I thought, like, yeah, to your point, like, I just want to make beautiful design. I just want to make good design, and it's like, well, no, it's, when I started out, it's, like signage, right? Let's take that for example. You have to lead somebody along a journey of where to get to, and like the path of least resistance, right? Like, and make it a happy one, et cetera. And like, same thing with product design now, right? Like, you're helping somebody navigate something, like get to an experience that is a happy journey along the way, right? Like, and continuing to connect the dots with the experience, and, thinking that way, I think that's what creates like really interesting problems to solve, and really interesting, challenges to me are like, give me a challenge. Like, we're dealing with this huge challenge at work. And I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, not like this, but like so much for the brand. Like, I really want to get in the weeds and like solve this problem, because this will actually help not only our brand and our company, but help the consumer, and I was like, if we can figure this out, I'm like, that's the success to me. And, this person who's, on strategy was also like, oh my God, I'm thinking the same way, so yeah, I think just grounding in those types of, look, as creatives, we're problem solvers, and I think it takes like a really unique mindset to do this work. And I find that, when I see those light bulbs kind of going off, right, for designers, especially junior designers, like mid-level designers, to kind of like show the potential, it's like a really great experience.
And some interesting things that you mentioned, it's funny for me, in my experience, there's a lot of times that I'll be talking with someone who's, working on that transition, and the question will be like, well, why do I need to do the job of the strategist? Isn't that their job to do that part? And I don't think that's the point at all. Like, we're not saying
Yeah.
learn strategies so that you can be a strategist. Like, we got into this business because we love the craft. We love, making things beautiful, making emotional experiences. And you were right when you hit on the experience part. Like, but as you become a leader, your role of understanding strategy so you can do that problem solving, so you can work with the strategist, you have to understand the problem before you can bring a creative solution. If you don't, then it doesn't connect, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why on other shows, we've talked about it as talking khaki, like learning both business strategy and marketing strategy, right? You have to learn to speak the language of business casuals in order to bring your solutions to the table. So I think that's really, really critical.
Yeah, totally. And let me just interject something. I think it can be really uncomfortable, an uncomfortable process. I think, you mentioned marketing strategy, like marketing, as sort of like this, totally, the M word, don't say it, it's a bad word. No, but, I think it's something, right, when you're talking about numbers and ROI, it can be very daunting, and I think also like really painful. And I'll just speak for myself, when I first started kind of getting accustomed to, like, especially performance marketing, I was like, this is not in my wheelhouse. It's not my soul. It doesn't live anywhere in my body. But to be able to just harness that as like an experience and also bring to it something different, and like shift it. Like, I have found that my comfort level has like increased, and also like, it doesn't mean that it has to be like, coupons that like come in the mail and like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean about like the richness. Like, it has been astounding and surprising to me at the richness of like the creative profession, of all of the different things we get to learn. Like, that's why I mentioned, like, when I got launched out of school into this world of other, that like I really had to get used to and embrace, it's like, it wasn't always comfortable, and it's like, I've even challenged myself of recent, it's like I've become kind of bored, and like, I want to push myself further of like, well, I don't know that, like, what happens if I learn it and then put my passion and intention and like strategic hat on to try and like frame it into something different. Like, to me, that's where the creative really lives, and it's interesting. Like, for me, this profession just keeps going and going and going in ways that I had no idea, when I first started. Like, if somebody was to tell me like I would be here right now today, I'd be like, get out of here,
Well, that's so many things you talked about that are great. Of like, when we're taking that next step, the uncomfort, that's a good sign that you are going in the right direction. Like, if you're uncomfortable, because the craft and other things, as we work up, it starts to get easier. And so, if you're really planning and plotting ahead on your creative career, feeling that uncomfort is a really good sign that you're trying something new. Your creativity is expanding, for sure.
Yeah. Well, uncomfortability, I think, is your learning, right? Like, we get to learn. And I think that's, to your point, is like a good indicator of that. Like, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. And like, for me, just, to me, that's kind of like, that's like a deadly thing that I kind of watch out for, right? If I'm not like uncomfortable and I'm just doing, like, I'll sit in that for maybe, a little bit. And then I'm like, all right, what's next, kind of thing, So, and I'm just that person, I like a challenge. I like a really big challenge. Like, I like a scary challenge. I just like it. I don't know. Cause it's like, when you get through it, it's like, holy crap, I did that.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of creative people who have that same feeling, where it's, you love the unknown, you love uncertainty, you like to dig into things and try new things. I mean, that's kind of the ADD in all of us, right? As creatives, to try that.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to go back to a little bit is, as we, as people are wanting to make this shift to a creative director, there really isn't a lot of guidance out there in this world. There's no training. We don't learn it in college. We don't learn, how to make that jump. And so, with that lack of training, tell me, in your experience, like, how has that promotion happened? How have you seen, because I just joke that it's like people just get promoted as a retention strategy sometimes, which is terrible. Yeah. But How have you seen or experienced other people going through that process without knowing what they're getting into?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one I think I find really challenging, but I find really interesting. That's it's actually it's really important to me, to be able to move through this profession as somebody who wants to give back and who actually really cares about management and cares about that relationship to my team, and some people are going to come along and some people aren't, some people have, that spark, like I know it, I see it, like I can feel it, like now, right away. But for me, the trajectory again, has been like a very odd one. It's like I have jumped around a lot in my career. Like I am now like kind of like settling in of like, I have had so much experience, here and there with that, managing teams like on my own, managing teams for an agency. And, I will say, within my career path, I've had, and I can count them, two people who have been mentors, and who have been like really good managers and who have cared, and I've seen them shape teams and really give back and really care, foster and nurture, right? Talent, not only talent, but also management. And so there's a couple things. So with those two people, one of them is currently a mentor that I ask, and I have like an open relationship and dialogue. And, I've known this person for over 12 years. The other one I've known for close to 20 years. And, I utilize both of them at different times to ask for help. And I think that's also part of it, is like, having that desire to grow. And around creative, like this is where I think it gets tricky, because in my opinion, and it's what I've experienced, there's a ton of ego in this profession, just like so much ego, right? And it's like, I don't know, I really truly care about, my craft, but I also care about the client, and I care about like the job to be done. Like to me, that is more important than, as you were mentioning, the end result. Although, I always strive to, create experiences that are, beautiful and, expressive and aspirational, et cetera, et cetera. But there needs to be that tie to, the purpose. And so with that, I don't know, I feel like, part of it is being in the right place at the right time. Like also, again, like wanting to, further and question my own, desire in terms of what am I doing. And also like, for me, I believe the reason why I'm where I am is, to really, it's like I work with a team, and like the team that I walked into is much different today than it was when I walked into. And, it was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? Like what is actually happening here? It's a lot of questioning. It's a ton of patience. But, I think it's like, we all know when we find that person who has something, and that, and you can trust, that person to help you out. But I think it's like, it's a very individualistic kind of thing, and, there are just people within this profession who, I don't know, want to give back, and I think it's like finding those people and like aligning with them. And then it's also like doing the work, quite frankly, I think it's like a balance. So you've got to have, in my, from my experience, like I've always wanted something more, and like I've also really cared about, like, there's a bunch of women that I mentor as well, in the creative profession, as I mentioned, it can be really imbalanced sometimes. And, I think it's, asking questions and also like being open and like doing the work, it's hard work. It's, it's, in my opinion, it's like extremely hard work to be a good leader and a good manager, and like, I also have like a really good manager who, isn't within the creative profession right now, and, this person's helping me continue to be a good leader, and in being a good leader, like, oh my God, there's so much I do not know. There's some things I know, and then there's some things I definitely do not know. And, being able to say like, hey, I need help with this, or, I don't know this, like, not like I don't know what I'm doing, but it's like a lot of times it's like you're laying the train track as like you're barreling down, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's been, I don't know, it's just been a journey, with a lot of twists and turns. And, I mean, really, like, it hasn't, and I say this a lot, like currently, in my profession of like, I'm often curious around other people's trajectory, right? Like, so I work in a marketing org, right? And we're creative within a marketing org. And there is a trajectory for people who primarily do the marketing arm and day to day, business. And around creative, it's a little bit more elusive, and a little bit more slippery. And you've got to kind of like define it, and it's something, yeah,
I'm
you can
laughing.
relate, it looks like.
Yeah, I have a whole presentation coming up at Max that's all about, how do you drive a creative career on purpose? Because it is so elusive.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, if I just pull out some nuggets of just hearing you talk, here's some great tips to our listeners of things that you've done in your career that I think are really critical that other people can do. And one is a mentor. And not just on a mentor, like I think here's the problem. People don't realize they need to get a mentor earlier than they think, like really start off early in your career and get a really good mentor and stick with them. And they also forget later in their career. They're like, oh, I've learned it all. I know everything. I don't need it. But really, even as an executive creative director or moving on, there are so many other possibilities that we as a creative leadership group are not exploring enough of becoming the CEO, of becoming the CMO. And I think, again, stepping into that territory of the unknown, getting a mentor, even if you're an AC or an ECD, is critical. Sometimes people call it like getting your board of trustees, like your board of directors, your personal board of directors. And I think that is critical of like having those leaders in different fields and in different areas of influence that can help you anywhere along your journey with advice, because it's not like we know everything. It's new experiences all the time. So I think that's a critical point. Like make sure you get your mentors early and late.
Yeah.
Another thing that just observing your when you're talking about your career is a variety of experiences too. I think many times some of us get in and say, okay, I'm just going to be an art director, and then I just be an art director, and I go to the next job and I'm an art director, and I keep doing that same thing, and you're not getting the variety of exposure. Whereas from you starting your own company, trying different areas where you had to be more, put on a business hat, like doing anything you can. And for me, it was like, working at a small agency versus a big agency of when you put on more hats than fewer hats, and even, consulting or doing freelance or doing, you consulted for a lot of startups, like even, exposing yourself to startup land. I think all of those experiences have helped craft your career, have helped move you along because they've given you different perspectives. And I think that's critical.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to interject, because, as you were talking, I was thinking like, it is nice, to have a little clarity here, right? Like, and around like tools. The other tool that was actually kind of groundbreaking for me was working with a coach. So this happened about, I've had a few, but the most significant was, about 3 to 4 years ago, I was really like, gosh, marketing myself, doing all these things I need to do for my business, making sure there's current work stream, et cetera, while being like a sole proprietor, small entity. I was like, I'm tired, right? Like I just got tired. You have to hustle, man. It's like the hustle is real. The hustle is real. So I was like, okay, I know I want to take the next step to really, go full time, kind of like make that commitment and ground myself. And, I worked with somebody and we developed like a list of like values, that were just kind of barometers too, of like, what am I looking for? Because I had gotten so accustomed to just doing so many different things, and like, again, like to that point of like ambiguity, right? Around like, well, what are the next steps? Like what, could be not only things that like make me happy, like creatively, but also interesting and challenging, right? To really take these different parts of, problem solving and, solution oriented, profession, so I started this like really kind of, it was like an encumbered walk in the beginning, really, like, taking steps forward and like discovering more about myself and like what made me tick and like what I was actually looking for and what was important to me and the type of environment and the types of, so many different things, and so that kind of opened up, an opportunity I took for like 6 months where I was traveling back and forth to LA and, really starting wearing that hat of the leader. And then, I took this job at Udemy, which was like my next step. And now I'm also working with a coach who, interestingly enough, we've talked about, CMO, CEO, and it's like,
Yes.
I never even thought of that before, and I was like, holy crap, like, could that be a possibility? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is like, I think there's something really interesting that happens when you're so close to the work, and then when you start stepping away from the work, your perceptions start to open too, and like the opportunities start to open, and a way of thinking starts to open. Because one of the things I realized is like, gosh, I have for years brought people to market. It's like, of course I know. It's like, numbers are not my strong suit, but I could learn all that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, so like now I have a session with my coach today. And last week she was like, okay, I want you to think about what's next, and I'm like, oh my God, oh, wow. Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
and yeah, it is awesome, and it's interesting when you also get the confidence, right? Like to make those steps and like to just set the intention, right? Like, and set sort of like that trajectory in place. What happens, right, with the conspiring of like the universe and like meeting people and your connections.
Totally.
That's what I mean, right? Like, part of it is like you're at the right place at the right time. And then another part of it is like, you just show up and do the work, like you put one step in front of the other. And like, also too, like, I think another critical thing is like maintain your relationships, that kind of fits a little bit in line of like mentorship, is like, just, it's like, I meet so many interesting, amazing people in the course of the day, that like oftentimes I'm like, well, that's it too. It's like, it's all dependent on who I meet, because like people, they throw your name around, right? Like, you show up, you do your job, you work hard, like, you're kind of like a good person also in the mix. People trust you, you do what you say you're going to do, like, they'll remember your name, right? And people bring you along for the ride. That's been like kind of the course of my career too, is like knowing people.
Oh, I love that. And I love it, even just like, I can't emphasize enough, like just seeing like both my experience in talking with you and other creative leaders, that those who are making it up to the top, those who are having, positions or finding positions as ECD or chief creative officer, are very purposeful. Like, you're even getting a coach that, at this point in your career, people may think, oh, you've arrived, right? But you're getting a coach and you're thinking purposeful about the next step and what you need to learn and what your personal gaps are. That's really good work that all of us can do, whether we're starting out or we're, later in our career. Like, it's so, so critical. I want to back up a little bit more too on some other things that you mentioned. And the word spark is one of them, because it's so elusive. Like, there are so many times people are like, what do you like? And you could say, like, when you see the spark, you can just feel it. Let's dig into that a little bit more of like, what is the spark, so that as people are wanting to make that step, like, are they showing the spark? Are they expressing the spark? And then I also want to talk about, like, sometimes people aren't ready. Sometimes they don't have the spark. Sometimes they, it's just very clear. And from their perspective, they're like, I've done all the work. I've done everything that I need to. Why am I not a creative director? And so I'd love to have you talk from your perspective of seeing the spark. And then how do you have those conversations when someone's not ready? How do you be transparent or very direct and let them know what they need to work on?
Yeah. This is a very fruitful conversation, and one that I think is, it's very, I don't know. It's actually something I'm going through right now, with somebody, that that I'm working with. And so there's a couple things. I think it's like, I'm very passionate about what I do. I show up authentically and, as myself. And I think that that is equally important, right, to the work, right? It's the same as like when you see something and it's like, yes, that's the idea, that's the story we want to tell, that's the intention we want to bring to life. It hits you gutturally. And like, there's a lot of work we're doing right now that's like, yes, that feels right. It just feels right. And I think the same is true with people of like, you can see their commitment and their passion, like they're willing to sort of, and I don't mean this in like in a, as intensive a way as maybe it's going to come out, but they're willing to do whatever it takes. It's like you have that, it's like that, somebody I work with calls it fire belly. It's
Yeah.
like you have that fire belly, right? Where it's like, it's a guttural feeling and you just know, like, and, right, especially in our profession, there's many different layers, right? There's different types of designers. There's like the cerebral designers. There's the, designers for stylistic sake. There's the designers that are like, no, I want to get in there and go, deep into like, what is the strategy? There's many, many different kinds and they all have a place, and however, like when you get those people that like are willing to show up, that like, I think there's like a humility too, in my book. Like I think the people that really stand apart, like they're very humble to they want to do the right thing, and there's like, again, like I kind of mentioned the ego, like they're kind of egoless. They're willing to like show up and work with people who are like difficult or challenging situations. Like not everything is laid out, and like when I first got on board with Udemy, I just kept saying like clear as mud, because it's like you don't have the roadmap, as well as like, it's kind of like this idea of more will be revealed, right? Like a step at a time, like just a step at a time, like it'll get better, and like there were people that like came along for that, that still showed up, right? That still did great work, that would take direction and feedback, right? Because it's like, it's difficult when you show up to a whole new team and they're like, who the hell are you? What is your vision? You have to be clear in uncertainty and like, vagueness or whatever. But, there are those people that they just do the work, you can trust them. There's the trust. And then like, to your point, there are people who want, how do I say this? Like there are people that want things before they're ready to actually have them. Like they think they are doing the work, but it's not really kind of like the right work. And like, it's challenging in a difficult conversation because it's like, then, I take it on as like, well, I can help you get there, wherever you are in your journey, whether you're here with me or whether you go someplace else, like, how can I help you understand a little bit more, and really root yourself in like what I think this, and it's not my agenda. So like, I want to be kind of like cautious, but like teaching somebody,
Yeah.
there's a lot of teaching, right? Like, and it goes back to that kind of mentorship coach, right? Like you have to coach somebody along, and I've had people on my teams before where I don't know, people don't like change, and they don't want to do the work, or maybe they want to do the work, but they think there's something, I don't know, there's like it's a difficult sort of topic and conversation, and I think it's like, the other thing too is it's not one size fits all, and it's like, also like you have to be conscious of bias, right? Like in terms of like, well, this person's great, this other person isn't, so let me write them. I mean, I've had that like, quite frankly before, where it's like, I have to watch my judgment with people because they turn around, they blossom and flourish, if you give them enough of kind of what they need. And, I'd say for me, it's like, it's a lot of whittling away, and like not even whittling away. It's a whittling away in terms of like communication, right? Like you have to be like, how can I be clear but purposeful and set an intention? And also like, to me, empathy has got to be like off the charts, and it's like, unless somebody is really not performing. It's like giving somebody the opportunity. I always believe in that because like I have seen miracles happen in front of me, right?
Yeah.
Like where people like, I'm like, who the hell is this person? Wow. Like I didn't know they had this talent, and you nurture it, right? So it's like finding that balance in terms of, really helping nurturing somebody, and giving them time, and I found this too, is like, what is the appropriate amount of time to give to somebody, right? To see whether they can kind of like come along for the ride or, if perhaps it's not the right fit. It's like, it's a very, it's a conversation I don't take lightly, and also one that I'm still, to your point, like I'm still learning about, I'm learning, what is the best way to, be clear with my communication, like, especially when I might not be clear of like, ultimately like 100% the end result, right? Like you have to show up and be a leader. And that's like with, a lot of uncertainty, and kind of maintain sort of like the ship, if you will. Yeah, it's a hard one, it's definitely a hard one, but, I find that, I have to show up with as much curiosity and openness, I think, as like, the person challenged in the role if they want to be someplace else. And also asking questions too. There's a lot of, where do you want to be? Why do you want to be there? Like, what do you think this takes? And like, do a job description. I'll do a job description of what I think, the role is, where I think we're moving. There's a lot you can pull from to help, but it's not easy.
Well, thank you so much, Lucia, for being with us today and talking about the jump to becoming a creative director. Now, before we leave, how can people find you? How can they get in touch with you? What are some of your handles or ways that we can connect with you?
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I think that's like a great tool and resource. I'm happy to give my email. I'll just give it out. It's just lucia.matioli@gmail.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear from people. You can also check out my work at goodthinkingco.com. There's also like links to how to reach me there. But yeah, I feel like I could probably talk another 10 hours on this. This is really like, it's so scratching the surface. There's just so much detail to run through, but I think you're providing like an amazing resource and tool for people. I wish I had the resources, but I also am like, part of it is discovery and exploration, right? It's like, you get to kind of like figure out things as you go, which is also like an amazing alignment with the creative process in general. So yeah, I want to thank you for taking the time and, giving me the time. It's been super great conversation.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving your personal background and experience as well. I think that's the learning process, is everyone can just learn from everyone else's experience, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Adam.
All right.
Thanks, team. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
So thanks for joining. If you want to watch our next episode, we are excited to continue to bring you all the topics that you need as a creative leader. You can find us now on YouTube. You can also find us at realcreativeleadership.com and sign up so that you get notified when the next session is available. And with YouTube, or even now it's all on your favorite podcast channel as well. We'd love it if you would just subscribe so that you'll know when a new session comes along as well. And if you want to join the conversation, a part of Real Creative Leadership is building this community. Join us on our website, add in the comments, help us continue these conversations. Even let us know if there are conversations that we need to talk about that are really urgent in your life so we can cover them and get some good perspective on them. You can find the Stoke Group at thestokegroup.com. Again, this is produced by the Stoke Group. Super grateful for them. We wouldn't have it if it wasn't for them. So if you need help with any of these things as a creative leader, they're the agency that can help you. And if you want to connect with me, you can go to adamwmorgan.com. You can see where I'm speaking next, information about my book or articles that I'm writing. But as always, the best place is realcreativeleadership.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you next show. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to Real Creative Leadership. I'm your host, Adam Morgan, and this series was brought to you by the Stoke Group. For the most effective marketing, use both sides of your brain to align your strategy, creative execution, and analysis. Connect with the Stoke Group for help designing each step of your marketing plan and creating a coherent vision. Visit thestokegroup.com to learn more.